This is magnificent.
Oh, yeah. Ooh, that's how it always starts. But then later there's running and screaming.
Jurassic Park from 1993 and its first sequel, The Lost World from 1997, are both closely connected to chaos theory. The previous part of this analysis provided a brief overview of how systems theory, chaos theory, and cybernetics interrelate. This section attempts to answer a single question. If even this abbreviated argument feels too detailed, you can skip to the next part. So the question is, why should it be considered more natural in the 21st century to allow a greater degree of freedom in relationships? To answer this, we can use cybernetics to compare the viability of different basic social architectures. The movie shows how opponents perceive these changes and what kinds of hostile reactions they may provoke. The most serious objections question whether such a family has the right to raise children, or indeed whether it has the right to exist at all. According to the movie, however, modernity does not bring chaos. Rather, it is capable of creating a stable ecosystem if allowed to live its own life. Opponents, by contrast, view the changes as an intrusion into their world, something that threatens their way of life and inevitably leads to chaos. As the turn of the millennium approaches, some even perceive it as a sign of the end of the world. A system can be kept ordered through regulation based on cybernetic principles. However, if the regulation is not sufficiently powerful or intelligent, if it lacks requisite variety, then chaos may emerge and may even amplify to destructive levels. It may sound strange, yet the governance of our society is closely connected to cybernetics, and more generally to the sciences that study systems. The term cybernetics and governance originate from the same root, the Greek Kybernetes, meaning steersman, and kybernon, meaning to steer or to pilot. Drawing on Plato, the state must be directed like a ship, heading toward a defined goal, sailing on dangerous waters that make the voyage risky. Plato writes that the true leader is not the one who seizes power, but the one capable of steering wisely in changing conditions. The forced leaders are those wrangling with one another for control of the helm, each claiming that it is his right to steer. By contrast, the true pilot must give his attention to the time of the year, the seasons, the sky, the winds, the stars. Cybernetics helps us understand how the basic architecture of a society determines its functioning and its effectiveness. In any society, large or small, control can maintain the system and preserve its homeostasis. In the absence of control, anarchy emerges, which literally means without rule. Total anarchy would imply no internal structure, only chaos. However, those with greater resources can extend their power over others. In earlier times, these figures were warlords and robber barons. Today, they may appear as oligarchs. The defining characteristic of anarchy is that individuals and groups struggle against one another, occasionally leaving each other alone but offering mostly no mutual support. On the other hand, total explicit control produces a single-source hierarchy, often referred to as monarchy, dictatorship, or autocracy. Here, virtually all power belongs to one individual and a small privileged group. The lower a person is positioned within the hierarchy, the less influence they have over the system, or even over their own life. Although anarchy and monarchy appear to be opposites, they can easily transform into one another. In anarchy, a particularly strong individual and their surrounding group may subjugate the rest, thereby creating a form of monarchy. A monarchy must atomize the lower levels to impede forming independent groups. In a monarchy, governance depends fundamentally on a single individual with inherently limited intelligence, which means poor governance. Therefore, the system may rapidly decay into partial or widespread anarchy. Any living being's opportunities are fundamentally determined by its available internal and external resources. External resources can be produced through laborious work, but it is often simpler to take them from others. This can occur through the exercise of power or through plundering by external forces. For this reason, groups of people must defend themselves. Anarchy is in practice defenseless because it cannot act in a unified way against external threats or dangers in general. In monarchies, the need for defense and governance, that is, representing the monarch, led to the formation of the nobility. This traditional multi-level power structure also shaped male-female relations, the distribution of labor, and the family model. However, the way of life that persisted for centuries began to change radically at the end of the 20th century. At the turn of the millennium, international agreements were upheld in many parts of the world, reducing external threats. Heavy physical labor became less common, while the created value increased significantly. The role of work, career, and mobility changed substantially. Life expectancy rose dramatically. Taken together, these developments meant that for many people, mere survival began to give way to a focus on a quality of life. From an evolutionary perspective, an organism is ultimately a survival machine, shaped by evolution, creating a safer microenvironment to protect the selfish gene, as Dawkins wrote. Of course, the term selfish gene is only a metaphor, since genes have no consciousness, desires, or goals. Genes are no more selfish than a falling stone is trying to reach the ground. They simply follow natural laws. Smaller or larger groups of people, indeed a society, also function like an organism, a microenvironment for their members. Protection and support manifest as the provision of resources to those members. For this reason, society must possess resources which can be built from the contributions of its members. The viability of the system is therefore determined by the strength and complexity with which it can respond to challenges. A society becomes more viable and has greater potential resources the more opportunities it creates for its members to contribute.
정치가 무엇이니? 정치가 무엇인지 묻고 있질 않느냐?
공자께서 말씀하시길
네놈의 생각을 묻고 있는 것이다. 하긴 네놈이 그런 것을 알 리가 없지.
나누는 것입니다.
나누?
나라의 수많은 재화들을 어떻게 나눌 것인가? 누구에게 거두어 누구에게 줄 것인가를 결정하는 것이옵니다.
Smaller or larger groups function as supportive microenvironments for their members. Ideally, this resembles a family. Let us call it a fair family, which is built not on hierarchy, formal roles, or exploitation, but on cohesion. A fair society, in turn, roughly resembles a fair family. Anarchy is weak and easy to defeat. A single source hierarchy is built essentially on one person's ideas, so its power and intelligence are very limited. By contrast, a society that enables more varied contributions from more of its members becomes more viable.
그렇다고 아무것도 안 하고 살아갈 수는 없는 것이 아니옵니까?
뭐라?
살아있으면 무엇이라도 해야 하지 않겠사옵니까?
From the perspective of society as an organism striving toward an increasingly robust state toward greater symbiotic resources is progression. It is natural and it represents evolution. The possessors of power, the privileged, want to stop time, to preserve the current state, or even to restore an earlier idealized, but in reality lower level form. They therefore perceive the freedom associated with greater variety as threatening chaos, even as a serious danger. Based on the movie's symbols, the family model with a greater degree of freedom is more natural, since it points toward society's progression. A family can be viewed as a miniature society. Its evolution is also an indicator of society's rigidity or flexibility. Consequently, the transformation of the family model toward true cohesion can also show the direction of progression for society as a whole. Cybernetics provides tools for examining the basic architectures of societies as well. A society is more viable if it creates more opportunities for its members to contribute, thereby offering them greater protection and support. Traditional structures are tied to the past, whereas modernity can radically improve the quality of life. The next part continues the analysis of the symbols in the Lost World.